what I really want to talk to you about is something that people hit us up all the time asking us questions about. How do I find a good litter? How do I research pedigrees? How do I understand bloodlines? How do I know that I'm like hedging my bets toward the best puppy I can get? And you're doing a lot on the responsible breeding side. And so that's what I want to dig in with you and just talk about your process for breeding and what you're looking at. Cause you got a pile of dogs down there in that kennel, and you've got a pretty diverse breeding stock.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the reason we have as many as we do is because we have such a diverse client background. I think when you say our process, it all starts, with your initial client meeting. I've written a couple of blog posts about it. You got to buy a dog from a guy you like because it's a relationship business. You don't buy a dog from somebody you can't stand, which, that's kind of, I think I say that tongue in cheek, but there's a lot of truth to that, right? You do business with people you like and people you trust. And so we whether that's, email, phone call, Skype as today's world goes, or however you do it, just an initial face-to-face phone call type meeting with a guy or gal. And I want to know what it is you want in a dog. In other words, the end product, if you can tell me what you're going to do with it, when you want it, how you want it, and all of that information, then I can take and go, okay, I have dogs with these traits that I know at the end of the day, after breeding them for so many years, this is about what you're going to get. And we can usually pair folks up really well with what they're after, just based on what they want at the end of the day. And that's, we spend a lot of time at the front end making sure people get that out. And, the classic is the guy that comes on and I need one hell of a hunting dog. Well, that's great. How many times a year do you hunt? Well, twice. Okay. There's some disconnect there because those two things mean different things to me. And it's just a lot of question and answer and back and forth and seeing what a guy needs and what we can do to pair him up with that.
So just so we're clear, this client first meeting is, this is before the deposit's been put down. This is before you're just like, hey, are we a good match? And you're asking like, how in depth are your questions going to find out? Are people really open with information, or you kind of got to needle it out of them?
It depends on the person. Your first time buyers are easier to get information out of because there is an expectation that they have to qualify to purchase a dog from you, right? If somebody thinks they have to qualify to purchase a dog from your kennel, they're probably good folks. You can kind of tell when you're talking to people on the phone how they're going to treat their dog based on what they're saying, where they're going hunting. For the most part, you just get that feel. And maybe it's because I've been in the business for a long time, but you just kind of get a feel for folks as you're talking to them. The folks that ultimately we end up struggling with at times are people who are so specific in absolutely everything they have to have because it's genetics, right? You can get close, but you're not always going to be right on the money all the time. And those folks, I tend to, I don't want to say try and lower their expectations, but we try and, have a frank conversation about, I can't control whether the dog's going to be exactly 86 pounds, right? We're going to try and hit in the mid 80s and see where we get. And it's stuff like that you'll pick up on. Does that kind of answer the question you were after?
It's getting there. And that point you just brought up is such a good one because you're not building a machine. Like there are no absolutes in this. You're hedging bets on all kinds of athletic traits and intelligence traits and all of these things you hope will end up in the neighborhood of what these people are looking for out of their dog. But is it that kind of person who's like, man, I'm a big water hunter. We hunt, geese, and this dog's got to be 85 pounds so it can carry the honkers, and it's got to be able to handle the cold and learn a lesson on the first thing. Those people that are very specific like that.
Yep.
Like when you're dealing with them, are you also going to them and being like, okay, well, what do you do with the dog? How you train the dog? How much time do you have? What's your work schedule? And try to get them to understand that it's on them too?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we'll ask that question. Are you going to train the dog yourself? Are you going to have somebody else train it? If you're going to have somebody else train it, who? Do we know them? Do we know the kind of dog that will succeed with specific trainers, right? Because there's some trainers out there that have a system, and if the dog doesn't fit the system, success is not going to be achieved. And then there's other trainers who will mold it to the dog. So you kind of have a little more flexibility there. And if we don't know them, and if the gentleman's going to do it on their own, what do you like a dog that goes flat out all the time that you have to bring back? Or do you want a dog that's more responsive to you and more attentive to you personally? And you know, if that bigger dog is out there, do you like a more bullheaded dog or do you like a more easygoing dog? And you know, just through those series of questions, trying to not only set the expectation of what we can provide, but also make sure that we're not pairing the wrong dog with the wrong guy. I guess that you're not going to get success. I hate to sound obvious, but you do that and the whole thing blows up. My favorite was a very, very well-known bloodline that was just a rocket, and it ended up with a guy in a wheelchair, you know? Yeah. I mean, that's just not going to happen, right? So hopefully that kind of, am I getting further down the road you want to go, and keep asking questions so I can get there?
No, absolutely. And you know, that's the whole reason that I wanted to talk to you about this is I want our listeners to understand that this isn't, you know, I think this is probably a failure on my part, but I feel like I've presented this puppy buying process as like, hey, the due diligence is entirely on you as the puppy buyer to find the right bloodlines and the pedigrees, but really it's a teamwork thing. And what I like about, you know, one of the reasons I wanted to reach out to you is Joan told me, you know, they're looking for very specific kind of dogs to go with soldiers who are suffering from PTSD, who may have certain kind of disabilities from their time in the service. There could be all kinds of like mitigating factors that are going to decide, okay, this is the right dog or not. And then a lot of those dogs are hunting dogs. And she told me, she said, if Justin doesn't have the right dog for us, it's not like he pushes a dog on us. He just says, I don't have that dog right now, or am not going to have that in the next breeding. And that kind of said something to me. I was like, okay, this guy's legit. He's not just pushing a puppy off just to get rid of one out of the litter and moving on.
No, I think there's a lot to that. In Joan's case specifically, you know, she's a unique combination, especially in the service dog world, because they do a lot of work with really young dogs. Mm-hmm. You know, you see a lot of the service dog folks, they're working those dogs at 1, 2, 2.5, and then placing them when the dog's a mature, you know, it reached maturity, reached all the commands. Joan's approach has been kind of different. She starts placing those dogs a little bit younger, and the veteran and the dog kind of grow together. And so far, it's worked really well. And some of it has been, you know, trial and error. When we first got into it here about 4 years ago, we made some mistakes, i.e. we had a dog that was too soft with a guy with an anger issue. And then we kind of, as time went on, figured out, okay, these genetics take these guys really well. So if we have a gentleman or a lady with an anger problem, we need, for instance, Capone is one of our stud dogs. We need to place a dog with some of that genetic with that person so that, you know, we don't set the dog up to fail before it even gets off the ground. And you're exactly right. It's a teamwork effort, especially in Joan's case, between her and I. And we are given the benefit of the number of animals we've worked with together, so you can look at that whole population and notice the trends, right? Yep. And I think that's another responsibility on my end as the breeder. I can see the trends, right? I got to keep enough of my own stock back every year so I can see what my dogs do, how they behave, how they handle pressure, how they handle hunting, how they do all that stuff that dogs are supposed to do. And then be able to go, okay, so for guy XYZ, we've had success. For instance, we got 4 dogs that live on Wall Street, right? So those dogs live literally on Wall Street, and then they go to the Hamptons on the weekend and they hunt a couple times a year. Well, that's a different dog than a guy guiding hunts for 6 days a week in South Dakota. Yep. And yeah, being able just to help those people get there is, I don't know, to me, that's the most rewarding part of the job.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about that, but I want to back up a second because, you know, when you're talking about the Labs for Liberty dogs and going to soldiers with PTSD, and you say, you know, they're working with younger dogs than maybe some other kinds of service dogs would be placed. That there's a parallel there. I was actually talking to Jillian the other night about this, where because they're emotional support dogs in addition to all of the other, responsibilities they might have. It's not a kind of situation where somebody like you can mold a dog for 2 years and hand off this damn near finished tool to somebody that might like a seeing eye dog or something like that. This is a dog that has to be like emotionally attached to this person to get the whole benefit. And it's a different process, but it's the same process that you see with, just a random person buying a hunting dog and a family pet from you. Is they're going to get that dog at, 8 weeks or whatever it is and have it through those formative years. And I know it's a little different with the Labs for Liberty dogs, but you're still getting a young dog that's spending time with you, and you have to take on some responsibility for that dog's development.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, agreed completely. It once again speaks to the versatility of the breed. I was listening to one of your other podcasts, the one that you sent me, and that's just it. I mean, it is the versatility of those dogs. It's amazing what they can do.
Mm-hmm. Well, that, man, I'm not to go off on a tangent. People yell at me all the time for talking about labs too much because I have a lab and I like labs a lot, but it's like,
sure,
when you look at what they're capable of, it's just kind of how we started this. Like, there are certain breeds that are just a really good choice for versatility. And there are some dog breeds out there that are like kind of single pursuit experts, and so it's it's a matter of, somebody will sit here. I've had people say a lot of stuff to me over the years about like, oh, you own a lab or you own a golden retriever or something. It's like, well, man, I hunt everything under the sun, ducks and shed antlers and every kind of bird. And I have a family, like they're a good fit for me. I'm not living out west hunting chuckers at, 6,000 feet or whatever, and so they are. And what we're seeing, with the work you've done with the Labs for Liberty and all of these different jobs they're getting is they are just more versatile. And I think if some of the other dog breeds were a little more common, you'd see that come out in them too, maybe to some extent. But labs they just handle a lot of that stuff right now for us.
Yeah. And, it's interesting you bring that up because that's a pretty important point, even when you're placing genetics with customers, right? The classic is the guy that calls up and says, well, I'm looking into these pointing labs and, I want the best damn pointing dog I can get my hands on. Well, then go buy an English pointer or go buy a German Shorthair. I mean, they're all around great dogs. If you want a specific job, go buy that dog for a specific job. And we have a lot of conversations about that too. These dogs are double duty. You can do what you need to do with them when you need to do with them. And, it goes back to that education piece that you were talking about ahead of time before the money exchanges hands.
Yeah, that just the willingness to do that with your clients is a big deal. And that's just the start. And I wanted to ask you when you were talking about that initial client meetup where you're, okay, what do you really want out of a dog? What are you going to do with your dog? What's your schedule like? All of those things that you're kind of fleshing out. So in your brain, you're going, okay, maybe this line, maybe this litter, maybe this pedigree, whatever. How often is it where you're just like, I just can't do, I can't do this for you. How often do you get somebody you're just not going to make happy?
Oh, it's rare, but I would say in the last calendar year, I've probably run into 4 guys where I just said, we're not the kennel for you.
And so what's the hang up? Just one example. Don't name anybody or anything, but like, what's one thing where you're just like, I just can't, I'm not going to be able to do that. Some kind of request or something.
The classic that you'll get is you'll advertise a litter and you'll have a pairing lined up and somebody will call and say, you know what, those are the genetics I want, but I want them on April 25th. And you're like, dude, the dog's not going to be born until April 24th. Oh, well, then I guess we can't. Well, I don't want anything else other than this genetics. Can I wait for next year? Yeah, they're going to cycle again in mid-April. Well, I need to have the dog in June next year. And, so it's unreasonable expectations on both sides. So that's a classic. The other one that ironically enough, a lot of the guys that watch pedigrees like a hawk know what they want, right? And so they'll put down a deposit on a specific female and male pairing. And if we change decisions halfway through the year because the market's telling us something else needs to change, we don't want to do this pairing anymore, then we're going to end up, upsetting somebody because they had their heart set on those genetics. And it's stuff like that usually. Yeah. I mean, it's just timing versus what they want. And the cool part is we live in an age right now, especially in the sporting dog world, there are a lot of really good dogs out there and really good genetics to pick from. So, it becomes a customer service thing as well, trying to do the best by the client.
Yeah, it really is. It's pretty amazing. Not only the pool of well-bred dogs that could fit your needs that's out there, but also just the ease and access to the people who are in control of these dogs and who can help you out. I mean, it's there's never been a time in history of us and dogs where you could find a better one more easily, to fit your life, but you just got to know the right questions to ask. And you got to understand, like, I want to make this clear about this. This is like genetics are crazy important. What guys like you are doing, crazy important, but it's only part of it. That's why we have so many training podcasts and talk to so many people, because you want to start out with the most potential possible. And then you want to put in your end, or hire somebody to do it, and understand that rock star dog is a culmination of that breeding and the effort once that dog hits the ground.
Yeah, the old gentleman who taught me how to run the business, a gentleman by the name of Byron Fagg, and a lot of the Pointing Lab guys will have heard of him over the years. He was a cattle geneticist for Purdue. And he used to tell me that, the genetics base in that dog is about 35 to 40%. Everything else, what happens from the minute the dog hits the dirt to the minute, I say dirt, the dog hits the ground. And then, on from there is the other 65. And you can control some of that for those first 8 weeks. And then after that, away they go. And there's your training podcast. And all of us have had one dog we've screwed up something on because we were just not, made mistakes. And it happens.
Do you believe that the 35% is about right?
I believe as the breeder, you're 40, 45, 35 to 45, somewhere in there. I really do. Yeah. I mean, you got to you're getting that first bump in life, right? So you're doing the backgrounding work on the pedigrees. You're looking at the health things, I mean, you're looking at hips, eyes, elbows, and as you go through the different genetic abnormalities that labs carry, and trying to weed out those that have it and those that don't have it, and enter things into the breeding program. I think that's huge. And, we get the question all the time, why are your dogs priced where they are? Well, because you're paying for that research and that time and this, that, and the other that we're putting into it on the backside. And any good breeder does that. I mean, that's what your job is.
Yep. Well, and so if you say a quality pedigree, the quality breeding is 35 to 45% of that dog. I mean, start breaking that down. How much is a healthy dog worth to you? How much is, and you might be sitting here going, well, I can find healthy dogs all over. Well, I can tell you, if you have a dog that you have to put down at 6 years old because of a genetic issue or something, or cancer at 3 years old, you'll pay more next time. I mean, that's what happened to us, to my family. And so, okay, how much is the health worth? And those genetic tests and stuff aren't cheap.
No, they're not.
And somebody's paying for them and paying attention to that stuff. And so what's the value of that? What's the value of having a smart dog that can solve problems or learn to learn well? What's the value of
save you money in training on the back end, right? Because we're seeing an age where average dog training is $650 to $750 a month on up. If you're having somebody else do that, it sure helps to have a dog that likes to learn.
For sure. And that's regardless of whether you're paying to have somebody do it or you're doing it yourself. I mean, how much is your time worth? How much is your frustration worth? I mean, how much is your that's the point of this podcast. When, people ask me, like, why are you doing this? I'm like, I want people to understand they can have an amazing dog, but this is what goes into it. And this is part of it. I mean, what is the intelligence worth? What is the athleticism worth?
Sure.
If you're hunting pretty hard, or you just want a dog to stay active with you, what is it worth to have a dog that can do that and not blow out its ACLs or CCLs after 2 years? And all of that stuff factors in here. And so when you start looking at, if people get sticker shock on a dog that's $1,500 or $2,000 as a puppy or whatever, it's like, that might be the best value in a dog you could ever run across in your life.